Hey, all you new gods and boom tubers. This is one of your co-hosts, Mike Booch here. I just wanted to give you a friendly trigger warning. The following episode, while dealing with comic books, also deals with the themes of that comic book, and those themes are depression, mental health, family trauma, suicide. We are not experts on these subjects. We are just speaking from our own personal experiences and from the experience of those close to us. Wanted to let you know that if you are feeling any suicidal thoughts, you can go to the suicidepreventionlifeline.org. And you could also call them at 1-800-273-8255. Thank you very much for listening and enjoy the episode.
Three, two, one.
Welcome to another episode of the Politipop Podcast, the podcast where we take your favorite pop culture media and discuss the social and political themes within. I am your co-host, Mike Booch, a.k.a. Highfather, a.k.a. Thought Free, a.k.a. Chunky Flashman, a.k.a. Dark Side Jizz. I'm not proud of that one. And I am joined with me, as always, by my sensual co-host. Please give it up for Mr. Ty.
Hey, what's going on, everyone?
And we are here today to review Tom King's 12-issue run on Mr. Miracle, the DC Comics New Gods character, courtesy of Jack Kirby, the late and great King Jack Kirby.
Yeah, the comic that proves Tom King can write, because I hate his Batman. But Mr. Miracle is quite the ride.
Yeah, I was wondering how you were going to approach this, knowing, I mean, you've already read Tom King's works before Batman, and it just seems like Batman is the odd one out for you.
Yeah, I mean, I actually really like his writing. I met him at Comic-Con. I think he's an awesome guy. He was really down to earth. I really like his stuff. I just hate his Batman. So I already read the first issue of Mr. Miracle a while ago, and I really enjoyed it. I just with limited runs like this, I just decided not to stick with it and wait for the trade. So yeah, I waited. I read it recently, and it was quite a read, man. Quite a read.
Yeah, I was in a similar boat that, like, I knew it was coming out. I knew it was good, but I thought it was actually just kind of one of those comedy comic books that was coming out, because every time I saw something online about it, it was just like, oh, this funny moment that happened in Mr. Miracle. And I was like, oh, all right, I'll get to it when I do. I was at the LCS recently, and they have like a $3 bin of trade paperbacks for like comics that are damaged or something. And this one had a rip in it. It was signed by Tom King.
Yeah,
and it
blows my mind. $3. That's crazy.
Yeah, and they got it, and I got it for $3, and I was blown away. Before we get into Mr. Miracle, I had some housekeeping I wanted to cover.
Go for it.
All right, so first off, the Avengers beta is out. Is Avengers a PS4 exclusive, or? It
is not. It is on Xbox as well, but Spider-Man is an exclusive character to the PS4 version, which has brought up a lot of tension between the gamers and the developers.
Oh,
yeah.
Boy. No, I'm for it. I mean, luckily I pre-ordered on the PlayStation, but I played the beta. I think did the beta stop? Was it only a certain amount of time? Because I definitely got it too late if that was the case.
No, so like it's in waves. So like if you pre-ordered, you get to start week 1. Then like I think they're gonna roll it out for people who didn't pre-order next week. Like they're gonna do it like in waves so that everybody gets a chance to try it, but you get like a little bit of a chance to play it early if you pre-ordered. So you'll definitely get a chance to play. You just may have missed your exclusive time.
Well, I did play some of it and I enjoyed it quite a bit. The like opening tutorial is this like huge like attack that's happening, and each of the Avengers has their own part to play in it. So you play each individual Avenger, and it's pretty badass. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've heard some mixed things. I heard the story, the single player is pretty good. The characters are really well done. I heard Iron Man's really annoying, and I heard that the multiplayer is not great.
Oh well, I mean, we'll see. We'll be the judges of that.
Yeah, it's only a beta, so you can't really get a full idea, but it lets you get a taste.
Do you have any fun stuff going on you want to talk about?
No, I've been rewatching the Mad Max films after we reviewed Fury Road, so that was a lot of fun. I'd never seen Beyond Thunderdome, so I got to watch that for the first time. Not my favorite of the Mad Max series, but it had some cool stuff. And I actually started playing the Mad Max game again for the first time in a long time. And I both love it and hate it, if that makes any sense. It has the worst control scheme I think I've ever played, but some of the coolest ideas, and upgrading your car is pretty badass.
All right, now I'm going to have to get on that one, too, because I do have it. I think I played, like, the demo forever ago.
Yeah. I think my mom got it for you, honestly.
Oh, well, yeah. I definitely got it from someone on your side, on your side of the road there.
It's definitely worth playing.
As we approach our way towards Mad Max Hellscape, I just wanted to cover a few things that have happened recently, because being who we are, it would kind of suck to not cover them.
Right.
And I want to apologize in advance also for all of the landscaping noises that you hear outside. We do our best to try and keep it professional here at the Politipop podcast, but they're cleaning up all of the waste that was left from was it a hurricane or a tropical storm?
It became a tropical storm for us.
Okay, so yeah, a tropical storm that we were recently hit with, that I will call Acai Bowl because nobody's able to pronounce the actual name either. So, tropical storm Acai Bowl, and some people are still without power, and others have branches cleaned up during their podcast. We all struggle in our own ways, is my point.
I mean,
but
we're in quarantine, so we're out of the studio.
Yes, the studio that we totally normally have, the professional fucking studio that we record in.
Yeah.
So there's been some unrest in Chicago recently. Did you hear about this?
What? No, tell me more.
Chicago protests, restrictions imposed after chaotic night of unrest. A lot of these articles are written shittily, and I'll explain why. Chicago police will limit access to the city center after a night of violence and looting following reports of a police shooting. Right there, that's pretty much the thing, is that every article, or 99% of the articles you'll find, will be like, looting and violence and looting and stealing and protests, and then it'll be like, also there was a guy who got shot. That's how it always is. Mr. Brown on Monday told reporters the seeds for this shameful destruction we saw last night were sown on Sunday afternoon when police responded to a report of a man with a gun. Mr. Brown said police attempted to interview the suspect, who fled and fired shots at the officers. Officers returned fire, striking the individual, who Mr. Brown described as a 20-year-old man with 4 prior arrests. The suspect is in hospital and expected to survive. After this shooting, a crowd gathered on the south side following the police action. The police action. That's a great way to describe shooting. Just say it's a shooting. Just say it's a shooting. If they were justified, then you don't have to fucking worry about it. Like, tempers flared, fueled by misinformation. This is from BBC also. But this is actually someone else's description. It's not BBC.
I mean, they're pro-cop too, so just different.
Are they? Get the fuck out of here. They're pro-coppers. Following police action, tempers flared, fueled by misinformation as the afternoon turned into evening, Mr. Brown said. Chicago police became aware of several social media posts encouraging looting downtown. I'm sure that's all it takes. He described car caravans. Oh, people are looting? I'll get on that. He described car caravans heading into the downtown area on Sunday night and said 400 officers were dispatched there. Criminals took to the streets with confidence there would be no consequences for their actions, Mr. Brown said. I should have gone back earlier in the article to say who Mr. Brown was, but I'll link to it in the show notes. You figure it out yourself. I, for one, refuse to allow these cowardly acts to hold our city hostage. Blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I've seen a couple things in and out about this. I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen enough details to really form like a great opinion on it yet, but if anything I've seen recently has proven true, it's that this probably isn't exactly the way the police are telling it. It's that they're making the looting the viewpoint, the entire focal point of the problem, as opposed to why people were looting. One article said that this shooting reignited the talk of police brutality and Black Lives Matter, like it still hasn't been happening this whole fucking time.
Yeah, well, people are moving on. It was like a fad, right? You're like, all right, like, yeah, Black Lives Matter. All right, it's been 2 weeks. We can get back to normal, and that's not okay. Like, if you really care, you're gonna keep this discussion going. You're gonna keep, supporting the movement. But yeah, I mean, like, it's the narrative, right? That they just keep trying to spin, and it makes a good headline, it makes good stories, but this stuff is not stopped. It keeps going, and it's just more of the same.
Yeah, and someone had mentioned on Twitter that it was a 15-year-old kid that was shot, and then somebody else showed a picture of him and was like, "This is clearly a 20-year-old man." And honestly, I still don't know what to believe. But
It doesn't matter.
I guess no. I mean, honestly, it doesn't.
Like, someone was killed, and no one should be killed. That's the whole point, right? That it doesn't matter if they were looting. It doesn't matter if they were burning cars. They didn't deserve to be killed, right? No one deserves to be killed.
Oh, well, then they'll hit you with the whole narrative of, oh, he allegedly fired shots at the officers. Like, that's the thing. As soon as you say that, like, he fired shots at the officers, I'm like, while running away. That's the second time we've heard that recently, right? Like, I don't believe your side. If you guys, if it had been like at least a year since the last time you unjustly killed a civilian, I'd be like, all right, well, maybe we should hear their side. But no, it hasn't been. If there's a precedent, so sorry.
How accurate was his running away shots?
Oh well, apparently he was John Wick levels of marksmanship because they felt threatened. I did see in another article that 13 police were injured, and somebody said like they were injured from bottles that were thrown at them and stuff. And it's like, okay, I guess that sucks, but still. Like, you're getting bottles thrown at you, and you're wearing armor. You guys have like gear to withstand all that stuff. I'm sorry. And what does an injury count as? A bruise? A scratch from some shattering glass, or like a legit you were hit in the eye and blinded permanently, like a journalist trying to cover police brutality.
Yeah, I mean, this is what you see in other countries, right? Like Israel and Palestine, and many others too, where you see protesters throwing rocks and then being shot. People are like, oh, well, that's not right. But then we do it here, and they're like, well, fuck them. They were throwing stuff at the police, and it's like you can't have it both ways. Do you think that murder is justified? And I guess if you do, then we know what kind of person you are.
Well, they do. And once again, we have to let you know that despite the narrative we've been fed since the day we were born, cops aren't supposed to kill guilty people either.
No.
No matter how awesome it looks when, Elliot Stabler might lose his shit on Law & Order, SVU, or no matter how badass it was when Woody Harrelson blew that guy's brains out in True Detective, we have our justice system for a reason, which once again I know it's incredibly flawed, but that's why we have a judge and a jury and like trials and everything. It's not supposed to be that people just get killed because they did a crime. Let them be sentenced.
We've basically gotten rid of the death penalty, and yet people are fine with a cop shooting someone in the streets. So I don't understand that. We won't kill them after a trial, after evidence, right? People, are okay getting rid of the death penalty there, but then we'll just murder them in the streets without even a chance to defend themselves in a court of law. I don't know. It just it seems really, really, really messed up.
Well, the people that are pro that are also pro death penalty. Like, let's be real.
Yeah, I guess they are. I guess they are.
It's the same cross section.
Until they're in that position.
Yes, yeah. Then it's don't I got rights? Don't I got rights?
I don't have to wear a mask.
Oh yes, that too. All right, next on the agenda, shooting near White House that interrupted Trump briefing is under Secret Service review. No gun found on suspect. Washington, an internal investigation has been launched into the shooting of a 51-year-old suspect by a Secret Service officer near the White House complex late Monday, which prompted agents to briefly remove President Donald Trump from a press briefing.
Shit, an Antifa assassination attempt.
Is that what he said on Twitter? Or?
No, probably, but...
Okay. Shortly before 6 p.m., according to an agency statement, the man allegedly approached a Secret Service uniformed officer standing post about a block from the White House grounds, telling the officer that he had a weapon. The quote-unquote, the suspect then turned around, ran aggressively towards the officer, and in a drawing motion, withdrew They could have just said withdrew an object. Maybe they're trying to meet a character minimum. And in a drawing motion, withdrew an object from his clothing, the agency said. He then crouched into a shooter stance as if about to fire a weapon. The Secret Service officer discharged his weapon, striking the individual in the torso. No firearms found on the suspect, said a law enforcement official who is not authorized to comment publicly.
Yeah, he looked like he was going to shoot an imaginary object. He got run into that firing position, so they had no choice.
Dude, whatever. I mean, it seemed like it was something more nefarious than it was. Like they were like, oh, there was a shooting outside the White House. And it's like, yeah, a Secret Service guy shot an unarmed dude.
Yeah, they want you to be like, oh my God, Trump was going to get assassinated. You know, that's what they're trying to tell you. Like, or make you believe.
Yeah, exactly. And which, just let me know when someone succeeds. I'll read that article. All right. Next on the agenda, and this is a little more relevant to what we're talking about today because we're covering a DC comic book. DC Comics hit with huge layoffs. DC Universe streaming service could be dead. The Warner Media branch of Warner Brothers was hit with a ton of layoffs today, and things seem especially dire this evening for the Warner-owned DC Comics. According to The Hollywood Reporter, a number of high-ranking people at DC are now out, including editor-in-chief Bob Harris, several senior VPs, and some editors, including executive editor Mark Doyle, who is in charge of the publisher's edgy new Black Label graphic novels. We reviewed one on the podcast last night on Earth. Furthermore, THR's The Hollywood Reporter sources say the layoffs have come for roughly 1/3 of DC's entire editorial staff, as well as the majority of the people working on the DC Universe streaming service, and the DC Direct merchandise brand has been completely shut down after 22 years of selling Batman toys. Very weird that they noted that's all they sold. The DC Universe layoffs I guess so. The DC Universe layoff. It was Booster Gold and Batman. Everyone got Batman. I don't understand. The DC Universe layoffs seem particularly noteworthy, at least as far as tangible chance for the general public goes, since they almost certainly portend some bad news for DC Universe itself. All right, whatever. So there's other stuff in the article. We'll link to it in the show notes. But yeah, I saw a lot of it on Twitter because now that I've disabled Facebook on my phone, I'm finding other ways to fill that void. And that's pretty fucked up. There's like a lot of people who are like, oh, you know, we stand with all the people who are fired by DC, blah, blah, blah. People who still have jobs at DC normally. But that's rough.
I mean, if I could correct the headline, DC Universe should be shut down. Just putting that out there. The app. Because it's yeah, I mean, I think they've really been struggling. The DC app is a great example. You know, it was a great idea. A lot of streaming services out there. You know, Disney's got its own. Obviously, Netflix is still king. There's a lot out there. I think every group has their own, right? HBO Max. I think even like NBC has its own. You know, Peacock. All these different ones. DC Universe did not have a consistent amount of content. And they put a lot of their content out to other people, like Stargirl's on CW or whatever it's called now.
That was supposed to be a DC Universe exclusive that had a lot of hype, and it actually mentions that later in the article. But nope, they aired it on the CW. Like, oh man,
yeah, Doom Patrol's on HBO. You know, like they're like
Harley Quinn, which arguably their best show. It's like Harley Quinn and Titans. You know, that was their jam.
I heard Doom Patrol was amazing, and they quickly put that on HBO. Like you said, Harley Quinn as well. So it's like, pay for our streaming service, but you can also watch it here. So I never got that. And also, like, all their animated films that constantly come out, they are not free on there, the new ones. You would still have to go and rent them for a certain amount of time. So,
seriously? I didn't know that.
Yeah, like whenever the new one comes out, I think... Superman Red Sun just came out. That was not on the app. You couldn't watch that for free. It's like, why even have this app? You know, why have this streaming service if we can't even watch the content on there? So I get why they were not successful there. But it is a shame to see so many people being laid off, you know, from what you would typically think of as a successful company.
I would typically consider DC to be a successful company, as a matter of fact.
I guess outside of their comics, though, they kind of dropped the ball a lot. Obviously, their cinematic universe is not nearly as successful as Marvel. Their animated movies have taken quite a dive. Their streaming service is dead in the water, so yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
We just became like the next G4 podcast or something. But yeah, it does suck. Like there was some stuff I really wanted to see on the DC Universe app, but the poor son of a bitch who I was mooching off of for the app sign-in ended up canceling his membership. So what are you gonna do?
That bastard.
But I know, right? But the wild thing to me is like they don't have enough of their own content either. Like, I had trouble finding the Batman movies on the DC Universe streaming app.
Yeah.
It also just isn't user-friendly either, but it does have such great content, but you got to search for it. And, like I was saying, you don't have 1989 Michael Keaton as Batman. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, like Disney Plus was pretty popular when it came out because it had so much content. HBO Max has a ridiculous amount of content, and like the DC Universe app, streaming service just has like nothing. They really have very limited.
How much was DC Universe a month?
I believe it was $7.99 a month.
$7.99, and here I think I get $6.99 for Disney Plus,
Yep.
And even when there were certain like movies that they didn't have 100% of the rights to yet, they were waiting a few months, I was able to get those on Netflix. It's not like Disney Plus was expensive enough to really be a competitor with Netflix. Like, I had to choose one or the other. So like, all right, I want to watch Infinity War, I'll go to Netflix, and then I want to watch Endgame, I'll go to Disney Plus. Like,
well, Disney also smartly would have like an estimated time for those movies. They'd be like, all right, like check back in July, check back in September. We're gonna have this soon. And the interface was a lot easier to use and a lot more user friendly.
Oh, 100 times more user friendly.
I also wanted to talk about what Trump just did, and then we were talking a little bit off mic before, but I think it's worth mentioning. So I have an article here from CNBC.com. Trump signs orders aimed at extending some pandemic relief after Congress fails to reach a deal. How heroic. The article goes on to say, President Donald Trump on Saturday signed a series of executive orders expanding coronavirus economic relief to Americans struggling during the pandemic. The president's 4 orders extend unemployment benefits, provide a payroll tax holiday, defer student loan payments through 2020, and extend the federal protections from evictions. Trump's orders will quickly face a legal challenge as continuing the programs will require federal funding, which Congress controls. We're going to save American jobs and provide relief to the American workers, Trump said during a press conference at his private golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Trump said he will establish a payroll tax holiday through the end of the year to Americans earning less than $100,000 per year, and instruct the Treasury Department to allow employers to defer payment of the employee portion of certain payroll taxes. However, there's no guarantee workers will receive that money. Trump added that if reelected in November, he would look to extend the deferral and terminate the tax, which funds Social Security and Medicare programs. The president's orders also extend the weekly unemployment bonus at a reduced level of $400 per week, instead of the $600 per week federal unemployment insurance that was approved in March, expired at the end of July. Trump said states will need to cover 25% of the $400 weekly bonus. This was Trump's big move. I know a lot of people have been talking about how, look at him. He's making a move. He's helping people. He's helping Americans. As you can see, he legally really isn't allowed to do this, first of all. Second of all, yes, the $400 is nice. At least he's doing that. It is reduced from the $600, but that was great. But the cutting the payroll tax really is not going to work. What they're saying is that a lot of employers can keep that. And
for all the idiots out there who don't host this podcast with you, what exactly is the payroll tax? Because I completely know. I just want you to say.
It's tax on your paycheck, basically. That
we pay, not that our employers pay.
Yeah, and that goes towards towards Medicare, towards Social Security. But the idea is that
all those terrible socialists.
Your employer takes it out of your paycheck and then pays the government. What they're saying here is that that tax is no longer required. We don't have to be charged for that. But here's the deal, that employers can still take that money out of our paycheck and hang on to it in the fear that they may have to pay that later on. So there's nothing.
And probably will.
Yes. So there's no guarantee that employees will actually see that money. And almost guaranteed they won't see that money, because if you're an employer, you're going, well, Trump just illegally did this. what are the odds that, come tax season, they're going to say, well, you owe this money. So it is not a fix by any means. What it really seems to me, and to many many articles I've read and people I've spoken to, that it seems like he's trying to prompt Congress to get a move on with their deal, the stimulus package, because he's up for re-election. You know what I mean? And it would never look better for him than to have something push through that stimulus package because of actions he took. He could say, look, I made this happen. I got Americans relief. So I think that's what he's trying to do here. But he's fooling people, Even my mom seemed kind of like, wow, I can't believe he did that. And I'm like, no, like you have to read between the lines. Listen to the podcast. He is trying to push his re-election. So obviously he's going to do things that will make him look good. And this does make him look good from a headline standpoint, but it is not a fix, nor is it a legal action.
But it's an amazing move too, though. Like, I mean, ironically, yeah, like, I mean, so ironically, he came into this whole presidency with like, I'm the deal guy, but loves executive orders, which is like the opposite of making a deal. You'd think that's something that on paper favors the working people so much that would be a bipartisan vote. Like it shouldn't be tough to put that through. But yeah, there are shortcomings that'll probably be spotted out, like you mentioned. I do think it's interesting also to be like, state government has to pay 25% of the extension. Meanwhile, like how many state governments are suffering from COVID-related problems? However, if the states now refuse to pay that, it's like, all right, well, it's the state's fault. It's your governor's fault. You have weak leadership. Like he just continues to turn people against their own governors, against their own lawmakers. It really is an incredible move.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, good on him. Wow, well played.
You got us on this one,
you son of a bitch.
Yeah, and also like a chance to do something for small business owners when you clearly haven't been looking out for them in the first place. But now it's like, oh well, you guys have your own money to hold on to.
Yep.
Don't worry. Yep. Despite whichever businesses are still actually left in business.
Yeah. I mean, and if you're on unemployment, obviously you're like, fuck, what am I going to do, right? What am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to live on $200 a week. But now you got that extra $400, it's not enough, but it's livable, right? So it's something.
Yeah. I mean, I am, and I'll gladly take that extra $400, but, nah, fuck him. Fuck him, fuck the government. I don't really give a shit.
It's the least they could do for us, but it's not nearly enough.
I've been working since I was 12 years old. So, like, don't
working since I was 12 years old.
Yeah, fuck them,
Back in my day.
I guess I have a little boomer in me, It's
Speaking of boomers, let's talk about some boom tubes and get to Tom King and Miss Miracle.
That's good. Now, I do want to address some Tom King drama that happened recently. So, you might have seen trending on Twitter, hashtag Tom King hates Asians, which caught me off guard because if you go to Tom King's Twitter, like he's very like anti-Trump, anti-racism, like, he's one of the good guys. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But recently he did have this drama with Jay Lee. Jay Lee is another artist, and Jay recently agreed to do a cover for the comic book Cyberfrog. Cyberfrog is the work of who we mentioned recently in our recent podcast. In one of our recent podcasts, we mentioned that Ethan Van Sciver not only is the creator of Cyberfrog, but he is also an artist who has worked for DC before. He worked on Dawnbreaker, a Dark Knight's Metal one-shot. He is one of the founding members of Comicsgate. If you don't know what Comicsgate is, it's basically a hate group full of a bunch of incels who hate any diversity in comic books. And they'll say like, oh, well, we just hate forced diversity. We hate when it's, SJWs and virtue signaling and all that other shit that fucking alt-right Nazi shitheads like to say. That's not the case. They hate women and LGBTQ and anyone who's not white in their comic books. They'll brag that they have a diverse creator base and a diverse fan base and diverse characters in their books. But the whole idea is that A, it's not done well, and B, that's really the virtue signaling, in my opinion. But yeah, so Jay Lee apparently, unbeknownst to him, agreed to do a cover for Van Cyver's Cyberfrog. So Tom King called him out on it and started, a lot of people went after Jay Lee thinking that he was a part of Comicsgate. And eventually it just turned out that he didn't know. And Tom King apologized.
So he wasn't aware of Comicsgate, or that
apparently he wasn't.
That seems really, really hard to believe.
It does seem hard to believe now that I'm saying it out loud. But apparently not. He has a chance to work with a good artist. I don't know. But Tom King did eventually apologize to him, and I don't think it's ended well. Jay Lee's dog recently died, and while he had to go through the death of his dog, he was also going through a bunch of people attacking him on Twitter, because Tom King, probably unwittingly, but maybe, he set the dogs on him, for lack of a better term. So so that happened. Jay made a public post saying like, "Oh, I'm pretty far from all. I'm pretty fucking far from all right." That was what he said. My dog just died. Yeah, and then also a bunch of Comicsgaters brought up that Tom King also started beef with Dean Cain, who was formerly Superman on the Lois and Clark TV show. So that's where they said Tom King hates Asians. I did look into it more. I realized that everybody who was tweeting this was a member of Comicsgate.
Of course.
And so they were all, or Comicsgate supporters. Either way, fuck. If you support Nazis, you're a fucking Nazi.
I think Tom King probably shouldn't have said shit, because, whatever.
That wasn't
the
best way to handle it. Reach out to the guy privately. Why do you have to fucking do that?
Yeah, don't call him out in public. But, it's so important in this day and age to know who you're acquaintances with, who you're working with, how you position yourself. So Lee probably also should have been aware of that, but I find it hard to believe he doesn't know about Comicsgate. I don't think he probably agrees with it. He probably just figured it was a job, right? So he took it. But yikes, that's a weird position for both of them.
Yeah, I also do have the tweet about Dean Cain where he's on Fox News saying that nowadays he probably wouldn't be allowed to say truth, justice, in the American way.
Yeah, Dean Cain's a piece of shit, so...
Yeah, I didn't realize until that one thing. I didn't realize until that interview. He was America's sweetheart in my head, and then he fucking said that, and then he was like, "Oh, all these people don't like cops, but but when you get in trouble, who are you gonna call? Who's gonna show up? A cop?" Which 3 hours fucking later,
I call the Ghostbusters personally, but
more likely to show up on time.
Yep, they have a better track record overall.
They really do. Should we do a story about Ghostbusters accidentally killing a civilian?
Oh my God.
Someone dressed as a ghost.
You're supposed to stop the ghosts, not create them.
God, oh my fucking God. And they're like, Venkman, you have technology that allows you to speak with the undead. Could you please call in your victim for the witness stand? And he's like, oh God.
Holy shit.
He's ordered.
Stay tuned, folks. It's brilliant.
Amazing. So while he definitely lacked some class and tact, I don't think that Tom King hates Asians, and that's why we're still reviewing his work on this podcast. He seems to be a pretty good guy. So Tom King, he, as we mentioned earlier, did a Batman run that Ty was not a huge fan of, but
No.
you weren't in the minority there. I still haven't finished it. I'd started it.
There
and
you
I was
go.
like, oh, that's something. He also did some work on The Vision, which is a Marvel Comics character, and it really was an amazing story. So we go into Mr. Miracle. Do you have a plot for us, Ty?
Mr. Miracle. No prison can hold him. No trap can contain him. He is scot-free, the worldwide celebrity sensation known as Mr. Miracle, and he is the greatest escape artist who has ever lived. But can he pull off the ultimate trick and escape death itself?
So like I said earlier, I thought that this was a funny comic book, like something more in the vein of Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. So, I think this was actually while the blackout was happening here. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get high as fuck and I'm going to read a funny comic book. So I open it up and it goes through the basic story and it's like, Mr. Miracle. So for the uninitiated, the old gods are dead, okay? All the gods you've ever known. Jack Kirby, after leaving Marvel and going to DC for a stint, he created the new gods. So instead of hell and heaven, you had Apocalypse and New Genesis. Instead of the devil and God, you have Darkseid and Highfather. They're at war for a while. They decide to exchange biological sons so that way they can broker a truce between their worlds and stop the killing. So you have Darkseid raising Scott Free, who is the son of Highfather, and then you have Highfather raising Orion, who is the son of Darkseid. And they're both raised in very different ways. Orion is raised to become like this true leader who is prophesized to one day destroy Darkseid and save the blah, blah, blah. And then you have Scott Free, who is tortured and bred to be a warrior every single day of his life by Granny Goodness. She's like the big top enforcer. She's like the right-hand person to Darkseid. And every time Scott tries to escape, she brings him back with her furies. Big Barda is one of which. Every time Scott gets brought back, he becomes better at escaping. So they make a better trap, he escapes it, and that's how he becomes so good at it. So that's his whole thing. And then he escapes to Earth with Big Barda, who is one of the Furies, also under the control and trauma, torture of Granny Goodness. And that's basically the origin story. And then we go to the actual first issue. It opens up with Scott fucking bleeding out on his bathroom floor after slitting his own wrists, and I was not prepared for that.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking.
It's a bold way to start a comic book.
I do want to point out Matt Fraction's Hawkeye is incredible. I know you said that it was a funny comic. It also had some very real moments, so not to turn people off from reading that. But yeah, Mr. Miracle, definitely, wow, like what a shocking way to start your comic. You give the origin story, and then boom, your main character is committing suicide. And then you kind of go into, his recovery, and Big Barda obviously being distraught, and as he's healing in the hospital, and it's pretty traumatic.
Yeah, and it really is amazing to see Barda because she is like one of the strongest women in the universe. And to see her broken down by the man she loves, trying to take his own life, that was something that was really powerful to see, because she is so tough, and she's like between 6 and 7 feet tall. She's a large, strong woman, and she's breaking down because this guy tried to take his own life, and she didn't even see it coming. I don't think anybody did. Yeah,
it was a shock for everyone, because doesn't. Well, they portray Orion showing up, right? And he's obviously very angry with Scott's decision. And he's once Scott's healed enough to go home, Orion starts beating on him, right? Because he doesn't know how to deal with the trauma of it. Everyone's dealing with it in different ways, because how do you deal with someone you love trying to kill themselves, and when you don't even know why?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine. And there is this, it's a recurring theme in this too, the theme of standing. Like Orion beats the shit out of him, punches him in the face and goes, stand. And Scott gets back up and he punches him in the face again down. He goes, stand. And he's like, all right, standing. And he just keeps standing up to keep getting knocked down. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I don't think I've told a lot of people about this. I only told D recently, but This struck a chord because it was probably about a month and a half ago, I had my first suicidal thought.
Wow.
Yeah, and I never had one before, so I was very thrown off by it. And it wasn't anything like, oh, you know what I want to do today? Kill myself. But it was more the, I woke up and I was just like, like, I wonder if this world would be any worse without me. Like, that was kind of it. This whole idea of like, all right, are things ever going to get any better? Or like, have I lived the best days of my life? Is it worth sticking around? That was all. No actual violent thoughts, no thoughts about taking, but just the thought of like, what if my essence weren't here? And it really freaked me out because I hadn't had that thought since.
Yeah.
So I don't know where Mr. Miracle's been my whole life. He's been in a couple Justice League episodes here and there. I've seen him in a couple of ensemble comic books here and there, but I've never really seen this version of him. And partially that's because of Tom King, and also you have to credit artist Mitch Gerads, who we'll talk about a little more at length later. But it's kind of in his character. I got interested after this, and I went and got a couple of comic books from the aforementioned LCS again. Support local businesses, please. And I went and got a couple of late 80s, early 90s issues of Mr. Miracle, and they actually held up a bit too. The dialogue was a little, the dialogue was a little off, but like one of the issues is Highfather coming to visit Scott and Barda on Earth and just like live a day with them. And it's kind of like a funny thing because he just doesn't know what it's like to be a human. It's the real fish out of water story. But also it's weird because Scott, while that guy is his biological father, he doesn't really relate to him or know much about him. He still calls him sir and talks to him respectfully. So it is interesting to see this superhero who he's born of gods. He is a god. While he looks like a man, he still has all the super strength and the invulnerability and everything else that the gods share. But to see someone so powerful still be so vulnerable, you know, it has to be done well. And I do love when it is done well in comics.
Mr. Miracle is not your common, well-known superhero. He's not Batman. He's not Spider-Man or, any of those people that I think is like a household name. I wasn't super familiar with him, and I'm a pretty big comic guy. I knew of him, but like I wasn't really into his character much. I didn't know a whole lot about his story other than the basics of the trade with Darkseid and Highfather. But so basically Tom King, in this article will be in the show notes. He did an interview where he said that he wanted to partner up with Mitch Gerads. Again, he had worked with him on a comic that previously called The Sheriff of Babylon, and they were originally, they were originally going to work on the War of Jokes and Riddles, the Batman story that Tom King did, but DC decided they wanted to put that in their main Batman continuity, and so the artist on Batman got to do that. So they said to Tom, listen, pick another story. You can write anything you want, and you can have Gerads with you. So he wanted to do something similar to his Vision story from Marvel. So he chose Mr. Miracle. A character that doesn't get a lot of press, a lot of stories written about him on his own.
He doesn't even have his own Funko Pop figure, Ty.
That is heartbreaking.
Yeah, because I looked.
That's more heartbreaking than this comic. Wow.
It really is. So yeah, he doesn't get the lip service he deserves.
Wow. Yeah. Tom King, he wanted to do something with a character that I think he could have a little flexibility with. And in 2016, Tom King had a panic attack. He thought it was a heart attack, and with the political landscape and just so much going on in the world, he was really overwhelmed. He had never dealt with this kind of anxiety before, and he literally thought he was going to die. It's in the beginning of the book. It's in the interview that will be in the show notes. So he wanted to portray, those feelings somehow. So he chose Mr. Miracle, and obviously having Mr. Miracle attempt suicide is it's crazy. It's a big moment, but it's something that I think. Whether you're a superhero or a normal person like you and me, it happens. It happens in the real world. It's something that we can relate to. You may not know directly someone's committed suicide, but I'm sure you know someone who has someone in their life that has attempted or has done it. You've heard people who've hurt themselves. It's a very common thing that people deal with, and that it's different forms, whether it's anxiety or whatever it might be. There's a lot out there, and it's a really tough world. And Mr. Miracle may be a superhero character, but even he has to deal with those things.
And we've also seen Tom King cover it in Heroes in Crisis, which is another series. I haven't read it yet, but now I really want to. But a lot of the series is about dealing with these heroes who go through extraordinary otherworldly events, and now it's them confronting their own trauma, which a lot of people didn't like. I think I was part of that comic book group on Facebook at the time, so a lot of it was, I just want the escapism, blah, blah, blah. But that's not really why I like comics. I don't necessarily go to it for the escapism. This may sound kind of blasphemous to those of you who are faithful out there, but if I had anything close to a religion, it would be comic books. I am an atheist. I don't subscribe to any of the major religions, but comic books is really it for me. You have these fictional characters who are doing otherworldly feats, and they have superhuman abilities and everything. And I try to learn from some of their lessons when I can. And so to see someone so powerful still suffering with that stuff, it really did strike me. And
definitely,
and if we could talk about the relationship between Barda and Scott for a little bit. this it's rough because Barda also went through the same childhood that Scott went through. So you'd think that the two people being there, being able to connect over their trauma and having somebody in the world who really understands you, that would be that's what keeps you there. That's what keeps you alive. That's what keeps you invested in this life. And I think that's how Barda looks at it. But Scott, not necessarily. She was upset, and she doesn't bring it up. They really explore this in a way that it would happen in real life. You can't bring up traumatic things the next day after they happen. You can't talk about something bad every single day since it happens. They don't actually go over his suicide attempt until much later in the book, when she finally lets him know how she felt about it.
Yeah, I mean, they come from very similar backgrounds, but in a way very different. She's from Apocalypse, right? She's from, she's a Fury. Whereas Scott was given to Darkseid as a peace offering. His family gave him up willingly, and that's something that he has to live with. That High Father was willing to part with him, and yeah, maybe it was for the greater good to save so many lives. And we see in the story he gets faced with a similar situation. We'll talk about it a little bit more later. And it's how do you sleep at night knowing that you gave your son to someone who's going to abuse him and just totally destroy his life while you raise that person's son as your own? So I can't imagine what that feeling must be like. But we've talked in other episodes. We have some father issues, so I definitely get, having some resentment towards your father and not understanding, certain actions that he took and not being able to really connect with him on that level. So, that's something in the back of Scott's mind too. And this comic kind of reminded me of Inception a lot. The way...
I could see it, actually.
Yeah, like Leonardo DiCaprio's wife was stuck with that idea of, having to kill herself to kind of get out of the world she was in. And it's kind of like what I feel like this comic was all about. It's like, what's real, what's not, how do we escape this cycle? And in the beginning, Mr. Miracle chooses to try to, kill himself and to escape it.
It's the one thing that he can't escape, and he really tries to. And Tom King mentions in this interview that he had for Sci-Fi Wire, also will be included in the show notes on politipoppodcast.wordpress.com. But he mentions that when you have PTSD, and we should mention that Tom is speaking from a personal place here. He was formerly, I believe, a CIA operative.
Yeah.
Am I correct in that?
Yep.
Yeah. So he he has served, and
he served in Iraq and Afghanistan. So he is
okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm not here to speak on what he did while in service. I'm here to speak on just him getting back. But clearly, whatever he has done, has stuck with him. Whatever he's experienced has stuck with him. And
he wrote The Sheriff of Babylon, which is about the war. So obviously, he's been impacted by these things. But Mr. Miracle's a much more personal, about anxiety and the things he was dealing with later on once he came home.
Now, Scott is a member of different worlds, and I think that his identity is a huge part of his story arc here. Or perhaps I'm just imprinting on it myself, because it is for me as well. I mean, you know me very well that when I really think back to it, pretty much my entire life I've been moving. I wasn't even 2 years old the first time that my mom picked me up from Texas and moved to New York. And then, a few years later we moved to Long Island. And then since then I moved to one town, and then my father got custody of me and we moved to a different town. But in the meantime, I was sent to live with a different family because he didn't have a place that he could keep me at the moment. So I lived with that family for 2 weeks, and my entire life, really, up until recently when I've been an adult and I've been able to control it, once again, didn't know where Mr. Miracle was my entire life. I didn't know I would relate to a character so much. But he does have that identity crisis here, that he wants to leave his family behind. And by his family, I mean Apocalypse and New Genesis. He wants to leave that whole feud behind and just live the suburbia dream, right? Like, he wants to be a performer. He wants to take a skill that, oh shit.
Okay.
Fuck. Yep. So he wants to take a skill that he's learned for survival and then use it to entertain people. Not too different from having to act like a different person in every single house and charm people and then deciding to become a fucking actor.
Slash comedian.
Slash comedian, slash podcast host, slash voice actor, slash artist, slash a professional wrestler I wanted to be at one point.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit. So stay with me, Ty. There's going to be a lot of realizations. Mikey Miracle. But you know what, that being said, actually, you know, Anne would always have an interesting saying for me, and she would say, you were born under a very unlucky star, but right next to it was a very lucky star, a very lucky bright star. You know, because in all of this, it brought certain people into my life, you know, like you and all the people who did come together to help me in my adolescence, and brought you and your family and everything. And, you know, while they were also great to me, like, I still wonder, you know, like, where's my home? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like it you know, it's something that nobody else can really give to you at a certain point. It's something you have to find for yourself.
Absolutely.
Oh boy. What else? Where are we going? I didn't expect that to happen.
And I think Big Barda feels like she's given him that home. You know, they feel like they finally have that, but I guess while that might be the case, it's still not enough, right? You know, he still feels inclined to try and kill himself, to escape life, right? Like, he's trying to escape life because I guess I don't know if it's the mundaneness of it, or he's tired of performing for people. He's tired of just living this life that, you know, he's kind of been beaten and dragged through, because it's been nothing but torture for a lot of it. You know, like when we say he was on Apocalypse, you know, it wasn't just like, oh, you had to work hard and you could never escape. Like, they literally tortured them, right? There was like pits of despair, and it was like hell. It was basically like hell.
It is. It's because you know, they're the new gods. It's like a whole new mythos and religion. But yeah, there were lakes of flame and lava and stuff, like really terrible shit. We do find out a little bit later that one of his old business partners, who was you know, the assistant to the former Mr. Miracle before Scott took the mantle, Oberon, he actually died recently too. Now, we don't really care much about Oberon in this comic, but him and Funky Flashman are huge parts of the old comic books, believe it or not.
I believe it about Oberon because even though he's not in it a lot, he is mentioned by Mr. Miracle very fondly. I mean, he kept all his cigar boxes because Oberon loved them, right? Like, they were something special to him.
Yeah, and Barda is nervous about Scott being alone, so she comes to check on him, and she's like, hey, just wanted to see that you're doing all right on your own here. And he's like, I'm not on my own. Oberon's right in the room with me. And she's like, Scott, Oberon died of, what was it, cancer, right?
Throat cancer.
She's like, Oberon died of throat cancer, what, last week or a couple weeks ago?
It was like a month, yeah, like it's less than a month.
Approximately 4 weeks ago, maybe three to 4 weeks ago, Scott. But yeah, so that, you know, so that plays into it. Now, I want to take this moment to talk about how Tom King injects probably his own experiences in the service into Mr. Miracle at this point too, because it's not long before Highfather is killed. That's another complicated thing to worry about. Your parent, not parent, was just murdered, and now your brother, not brother, is taking over as the new Highfather, and Scott and Barda are dragged into another war between New Genesis and Apocalypse.
Yeah, they are drafted into that war.
Yes. Thin line, dragged and drafted. But yeah, and it's a war they want no part of. You know, these are beings with an extraordinary background, but they actually, I think they find solace in the mundane, that they want to just live at home and be a couple and live their lives, and yet they're being brought into all this intergalactic bullshit they tried to leave behind. And, you know, that, I don't know how you feel about your family, but I know for a fact that's how it is with mine and a lot of other people. You just try and leave your shit behind, but no matter what, you still get dragged back. And I think you kind of become this person you don't want to remember anymore. There's something about your family that just brings out in some cases the best in you, but in other cases the worst in you, because they remember you at your most vulnerable moments. So we do see that, Barda and Scott are brought back into this, and we see this side of Scott that we normally wouldn't equate with a showman, that he is murdering parademons with, he's got guns and sniper rifles and swords, and he's like all about you see him screaming for New Genesis, and he looks like a madman, just slaughtering people, leading
He's
armies.
covered in blood, right?
Yeah.
Like it's,
and can we take this moment to appreciate Mitch Gerads' art? Because holy crap.
Yeah, it's amazing. He's really, really talented. And whoever did the color, I didn't look at it, the coloring's amazing. I mean, it's just, everything pops that needs to pop, when they're fighting in the war, everything's kind of dark, and it's beautiful. And I love that constant in his ear, it's like, I need you here. I need you there. The forces are moving on this area. I need you over there. Like, it just like the orders keep being barked at him. He's like, yes, High Father. Okay. Like to the next battle and to the next battle. And you can tell he's tired. And he doesn't really care. Yeah, he doesn't care.
Yeah. But meanwhile, when he is leading them, he's putting on that war face and having that intensity because he knows he has a part to play. Meanwhile, he's just like, I just want to fucking be home at this point. Like.
And how many times do they say your brother? And he's like, he's not my brother, right? At Orion, he's like,
yep,
he's not my brother. And I get that, like from a stepfather point of view, it's like, oh, your dad, he's not my dad. It's like, he is, but he's not,
Yeah, even my father, I stopped calling him dad. And, I'm like, oh, my father. But then also it does become tough to talk about certain people in your life because you may not have a one-word label to affix to them. Like, oh, my fiance or my brother, my sister, my wife, blah, blah, blah. Like, because I know, how do I describe Anne, right? How do I describe your mom? Like, oh, my best friend's mom, my brother's mom. Like, she took me in, so she's more than just his mom. Like, it's tough to do that. But for, these people are telling Scott who Orion is to him, who these people are to him. Oh man, it does get to be exhausting. And once again, to see a guy who can just slaughter parademons, without a second thought and do his job on the battlefield, to see him actually struggle with, hey, it's not my brother,
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of him trying to be aggressive either, which is an interesting take to have on these heroes. Is that he, when everyone else is resorting to violence, he doesn't. And that's because I think that he grew up in violence, that violence really defined him. And he doesn't, he knows what it's about, and he doesn't want to continue that cycle.
Definitely.
Now, I have a question for you. Speaking of the art that we mentioned from Mitch Gerads. So I took pictures of individual panels that I really loved. And a lot of them you could tell, at least from an artist's perspective, that they were done with realistic photo evidence, because he has this way of catching these characters in mid-motion that, like, your brain almost completes the rest of the motion they're making. If they're, like, mid-run or jumping from one crowd to another crowd, like, you see the whole thing playing out in your mind.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't think of that.
Oh yeah, like the one shot when he's jumping from the crowd and like letting loose with a Superman punch, and then the shot where he finds Orion's dead body just after he enters the hall, and like you see him in mid run and he's like, like kind of like he's stumbling. It's great. Now I took pictures of certain panels that I really loved and I sent them to you. How was it for you to actually see the panels in in context with the rest of the book?
So, to be honest, I'd forgotten the ones you had sent me. So after I finished reading it, I went back and looked at the ones you'd sent me. But yeah, I mean, they were great. They're great moments. One thing I thought that was really cool, the way they do some of the pages are, they'll be the same panel. It'll be the same image over and over, maybe with like a slight change to facial feature. But it'll be, I don't know, 8 panels or 9 panels of the same image, whether it's Mr. Miracle's face and with dialogue over it, and like I don't know, something about it just like it's like he like stuck in that same cycle, like that he's stuck in, where the same thing's happening, like when Orion puts him on trial and he's asking those true or false questions, And it's just them going back and forth, and it's almost the same image over and over for a couple pages. But it draws you in still. You don't get bored of it. I feel like there's other comics in the past that have done something similar, like The Dark Knight Returns, right? There was a ton of panels, especially like newscasters and stuff, right? Yeah. And to me, while it's a great comic, the something about the art just never drew me in, whereas here it does. It's almost like it's like painted on. And the way you can see the slight shift in the facial features, it just really, really grabbed me.
I also really appreciate how every page is 9 panels too.
Yeah,
it's all the same size panel 9 times, and yet it still seems like they switch it up so much, even though they don't at all. The layout is the exact same. The only different panel, I believe, is the double splash page in the first issue where Scott's bleeding out. Everything else, I might be wrong because I didn't read it as recently. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure every panel is like that. And so you kind of get into the cadence of it, and I think that's why it pulls you in now that you mention it. And, you kind of know what to expect next, and you just follow it. You don't have to do a lot of work. You really get drawn into the story, into what I believe is like kind of more of a cinematic feel.
Very cinematic. And they even do it with panels that don't need to be like that. Like there's a couple pages where Darkseid's sitting down, and it's clearly one image, but they split it into 3.
Yep.
Like his arms on either side, and like just to show like how impending he is. He covers 3 panels just sitting there. How strong and powerful he looks. So it definitely looks cinematic. Absolutely. Yeah, there's obviously some big twists, by the way. So as always, spoiler warning. But if you're listening, you should have probably read this already.
Yeah, we're about an hour in.
Yeah.
Then again, we didn't really talk about Mr. Miracle.
We haven't really spoiled much.
Yeah, so definitely spoilers. As I mentioned, Orion dies. This is shortly after he has that whole like faux trial with Scott, where he puts Scott on trial as being a possible enemy of New Genesis, an undercover agent for Darkseid. And in this moment, and I really like how it was brought up in this one article on Medium.com. I want to just read an excerpt real quick where this guy is describing what's happening. The series shows Scott's growth from his lowest moment, picking up the pieces and trying to move forward. He's continually contacted by other characters from his home world that are trying to bring him back, and he keeps having to fight to grow and not be brought back into the hardship. We've covered that. He tries to hold it together and go forward, but family and old rivals challenge his mental state. In issue 4, one of the moments that sticks with me is that Scott is being questioned for a murder and forced to tell the truth. He is made to look back at his life and come to face the pain in it. We see Scott break down, something you don't see all the time in a superhero comic, and he loses it. Another moment that struck me because at the time of reading this, I was working through some of my own identity struggles and battling with my mental health. So yeah, we do have Orion is continually questioning him. He's like, "Oh, I see. You hate our father." And Scott doesn't know how to answer it. And he's like, "You hate our father. True or false?" He's like, "True. Fine." And Orion is really exhibiting some narcissistic behavior here too, because he knows what he wants to get out of Scott. So he pretty much goads him into it. Like he uses quote unquote logic to bring out the worst in Scott. And he keeps asking these same questions, you hate me, true or false? You hate New Genesis, true or false? You hate Apocalypse, true or false? And then, you hate God, you hate yourself, you hate your life. And he just ends up saying, so you are hate. And a little bit later on, Scott just fucking lets Orion have it, which you didn't think was possible because the way he was letting Orion treat him before, you're like, you thought he couldn't take him in a fight. That's the only reason why he took getting hit in the face over and over again. But no. And he just, he punches him in the face, and then he just keeps screaming at him until Barda grabs him and holds him as he breaks down. And oh man, what a moment. That was so powerful to me.
Yeah, I don't think anyone expected that. Orion's clearly shocked that Scott has hit him, so forcibly, and it's just, yeah, he's trying to exert his influence, his power on him. Earlier he makes him bow to him. I don't think that's something Highfather ever did. Highfather had never done that to Scott, but now, this is the new rule. Now that Orion's Highfather, we are putting this rule into effect. You have to bow, and this is really Scott's position, right? Scott should have been Highfather. He is the legitimate son of Highfather, but because he was given the dark side, Orion has kind of taken his place. So, while I don't think he's jealous or really wants that, I think he does think about that, and he sees the way Orion treats him, and it's got to be in the back of his mind to go, that could be me right there. How dare you treat me like this, like I'm nothing. And yeah, he finally breaks down, because I think he's so confused. Part of him thinks maybe I'm part of the anti-life equation. Maybe Darkseid has made me an agent. He doesn't know what's real anymore. He's clearly been hallucinating. There's so much uneasiness in his own mind that he can't handle, not only this war, but just talking to his brother. It's a really difficult situation for him.
And he never gets the chance to deal with it either. Like, before him and Barda are ready to go into the boom tube, he's like, I don't think I should be doing this, or, something to that effect. And she smacks him to the ground. She hits him and she goes, stand. And he's like, standing. Like,
yep.
He's not allowed the time to really deal with the trauma. So it's just kind of like, all right, suck it down and keep moving. And this, I mentioned on the podcast before, my fucking mom died last year, and it was a life-defining experience, because like there was a lot that had happened between her side of the family and myself and my father, and having to, like, I wanted to live my own life too, but at a certain point I kept getting pulled back and I had to deal with it. And I just remember, like, after I mentioned in the Lord of the Rings episode already, when my father was like, oh, you gotta be strong. And I'm like, no, like, I was strong the entire time she was fucking dying. I don't have to be strong now. And we see Scott's in a similar position where, like, he has to fight this war. He has no choice but to be strong. Yep. And, he does end up getting found guilty of being an agent of Darkseid, and he's going to remit himself to Orion to face punishment, which I'm going to assume is an execution.
He says execution because he says, I can't contain you, because Mr. Miracle always escapes.
You're damn right he fucking can't.
I have to execute you. So I'll see you, in 2 days or 3 days or whatever it is. And this is actually one of my favorite parts of the book, where he's having like his last day with Barda.
Oh,
right.
So
and
good.
They're stuck in LA traffic, and they're talking about using a boom tube, and Mother Box is like, well, you could like destroy the entire planet if you use the boom tube on another position on Earth. And she's like, maybe it's worth the traffic. They're just like, they're going back and forth, having fun. They go to the fair. They're looking at the the lights. It's one of my favorite
prizes.
Issues. Yep.
It is really beautiful. I definitely teared up looking at that, because it makes you think, like, if you had one day, one day left, like what would you do? And it's just, once again, it's not him flying around the galaxy with Barda. It's him just trying to be a regular person with the woman he loves. And he does give her the option, which I think is very interesting, because I think she values Scott's life more than he does. And
Definitely.
that's fair, right? Like, I think you would definitely be more willing to die for your partner than to let them die for you, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so he gives it to her. He's like, listen, if you want me to stay, we'll work something out. Because he knows that him and Barda can fight their way through if they have to. But if not, then don't. So she's in the bathroom. She comes out, and spoilers, we do find out, at least in my opinion, the reason she tells him to stay is because she found out she was pregnant while she was in the bathroom.
Well, earlier in the issue, she does say, I can't be your reason. Like, I can't tell you to stay. You have to make that decision. It's your life. She's like, I won't be the deciding factor. Like, I won't tell you what to do.
She does say that.
She tells him very early on in the issue. And then at the end, she changes her mind. Because, like you said, she's pregnant. She doesn't want to do this alone. She wants Scott with her. So she tells him to stay.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know how Tom King got it so right, unless he's experienced this stuff personally, but it is interesting to see your life valued from somebody else's point of view. You know what I mean? I think we do come down pretty hard on ourselves. We are our own worst critics, or at least we should be to an extent. And to know that there is somebody else out there who it does make a difference to them, whether you're in the world or not. that's something worth fighting for. And, we see the entire next issue, because this is after Barda. I don't want to undersell her at all. The guards from New Genesis are there to get Scott. Is it Light Ray and somebody else, I think?
No, I think they fight Light Ray later.
Oh, they fight Light Ray later? So there's some guards ready to escort Scott to New Genesis, and Barda comes out of the bathroom and fucking beats their heads in with her staff, which is a club.
Oh,
at the time.
Isn't it the funky guy who's always
Does she beat up Funky Flashman?
I'm pretty sure she does.
Oh my god.
Yeah, she does.
I mean, Flashman's kind of a dick in this, but I mean, he does redeem himself, but the position he has is as Scott's publicity agent. Like, he gets him his gigs and handles PR and spin and everything.
Yeah, she beats the hell out of him, and she's covered in blood, she's naked, she looks at Scott and goes, "Stay."
That's a beautiful ending. And the whole next issue, which is fantastic in my opinion, is just them raiding New Genesis. Like, they're going through, taking out all the guards and everything, doing all this awesome fighting and tricks and working together. But the whole time they're talking about the most mundane stuff, like how they're going to fix up the living room. And because I think that's really where they want to be. They want to be home. They want to have their home. And at the very end of it, Scott's wondering why Barda wants to extend one of the walls to make another room. And she says, "I'm pregnant."
Yeah, it's such a great reveal. Like, he doesn't, like, they're talking about, let's change this up, let's move this around, and he's kind of opposed to it. He's like, well, why do we want to do that, Like, why do we want to get rid of stuff? And she's like, I got stuff because I never had any growing up. And that really got me, Like, when you're poor as a kid, right? And, like, you want to buy yourself things when you have money, and that's why I have purchased a lot of items later on when I had my first couple of jobs. I would, like, buy all these kinds of movies and comic books. I just wanted to own it, to buy it myself so that no one could take it away from me. And, I think that's kind of where Barda, probably did, and Scott too. And Scott's like, well, just because we don't need it doesn't mean you don't want it. Why do you want to get rid of so much stuff? Why do you want to move so much stuff? And they're just fighting their way through. And finally, she does say that she's pregnant, and it makes sense now. Okay, we need to think about how we're gonna, get this child in here, where we're gonna put them. And this all leads to him confronting Orion, right? And he's
they're
like,
not planning on killing.
No, she's like, talk to him. She's like, he's your brother, talk to him. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna go in there and talk to him. So he walks into the room ready to, have a heart-to-heart with his brother. And he finds him dead.
Turns out Darkseid has assassinated his biological son, former High Father of New Genesis, Orion. And unfortunately, it now falls to Scott to be the High Father of New Genesis and lead this war.
Which is interesting. It's like, why doesn't Darkseid just kill Scott right there?
That is a good question.
Because he could, right? I feel like at any time he could theoretically just kill him, but he doesn't. And I guess it's that idea that maybe, like, Scott is a little bit more a son of Apocalypse than he wants to admit. Like, he does have, like, these heart-to-heart moments with Granny Goodness, with Darkseid, with all the people of Apocalypse, and he's kind of, there is a familiarness there that he does, he just has, because he grew up there. That was his home, and they know him. And I think this war, they want it to go on in a way. I think that it gives them a purpose to wage war against each other.
I'll give you my theory when we get to Darkseid's conditions of peace.
All right, and I'll give you my sword.
And my axe. That'll be my theory as to why he doesn't kill Scott right then and there, because he is Darkseid, one of the baddest motherfuckers in the galaxy. Yeah. He could do it. So we have another issue in which this whole issue is actually just Barda giving birth, which is awesome. It's such great. a great issue. They bring in the Furies that Barda used to work with.
They're like her sisters, I feel like they're,
They are, and they're sitting in the middle of a civilian hospital, like in California. It's just them, with a bunch of humans around, and they're all in their full, Fury uniforms and everything, and, almost getting into fights with each other and stuff. And it is just great. also because Mitch doesn't shy away from the fact that this is kind of an ugly process. Like Barda, she's showing all of her triple chins and her sweat and her saliva and her tears as she's yelling and pushing this baby out. And I really think that it was an awesome moment because, this is one of the greatest warriors ever. And we just see her doing something that, once again, like we would consider to be just, that's just what people do.
Yep.
This is another leg of their journey. We do see that Scott's trying to keep some sense of normalcy. He goes out to visit the Furies, who he's in the middle of a war with. Like, they're fighting for the side of Apocalypse, but they still wanted to come and see Barda. And I think, what do they say exactly? That they couldn't have children or something along those lines?
I think they just wanted to support her. I mean, I thought they were just there to support her. They were like, she's the first, this is going to be the first child born of the new gods. So it's kind of like a huge moment.
So yeah, one of them says that there hasn't been a kid born to a Fury since, and then she doesn't finish the sentence. It makes you wonder, like, are Furies allowed to have children? Are Furies made barren at the beginning of their lives? Or do their children end up getting taken away and made into God knows what by Apocalypse and Granny Goodness? So, but yeah, it is interesting just to see that there are these people who, once again, like, you'd think their whole life is about war and fighting, but they still come to support one of their sisters in arms. It kind of, I don't know, makes you think about family, right? How, like, you may be able to achieve stuff that they're not, and it's something that they look upon. Like, sometimes with jealousy. In this case, I don't think it is jealousy. I think it is true reverence and appreciation for the state that Barda's in. We also see that one of the Furies gives Scott a knife that it was originally made from Darkseid's DNA to kill Darkseid.
Yeah, the Farron knife.
Yeah, and she gives it to him and says, use this to cut her open if it's a C-section. And then one day I will use it to kill you.
And Barda's like, that knife doesn't cut, it makes you burn from the inside. She's like, she's trying to kill me. And he's like, I think she was sincere.
Yeah, and we do see that when the baby's born, it has the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck, and they can't get it off. They can't cut through it because it's a god baby. And this beautiful moment, Scott uses that knife that's made to kill gods, and he used it to save his baby's life, Jacob's life, and he cuts the umbilical cord. And it was really great. I cried reading that one.
Yeah, it was very good. He gives the knife back. He's like, thanks, it helped, And she's like, great, I'm glad. I'm still going to use it to kill you when the war starts again. And he's like, okay, It's like, okay.
Mm-hmm. And as we move forward in this war, we also see that Scott and Barda are now taking turns raising this child. Each of them has their own day or days, while the other person is taking their place on New Genesis to continue leading and fighting this war.
Yeah, I love that too. Like, he'll be in the middle of a battle, in the middle of commanding his troops, and, Barda will call him, and they'll be like, there's a doctor's appointment, and you're supposed to be here, fighting this battle. And he's like, all right, I guess I'll do the battle. You do the doctor's appointment. And it's like, how do you raise a family while also fighting a war between gods? It's obviously very difficult and also kind of funny.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's a little hilarious too, because Barda challenged one of Darkseid's minions to a one-on-one fight to see whose squad is going to move out of the area. Scott takes on this dude and gets his ass handed to him because Barda's clearly the better fighter.
Yep.
And he's like, all right, we're moving out. And she's like, how'd it go? He's like, we're moving our forces out. She's like, oh, I'm sorry, babe. And he's like, yeah, it's fine.
I think he's like, I almost had him, And she's like, I'm sure you did, She's just supporting him.
And this is a moment where we also get to see Scott on one of the panels. We see that his leg is being repaired from the inside out from a wound that he had sustained. I don't think during that fight in particular, but now we see that it is possible for these gods to be wounded, and that just because they may look good on the outside doesn't mean that they still can't take damage or abuse or anything. And I want to take that moment to just flash back real quick to their interaction with Granny Goodness. Granny Goodness is the woman who trains the Furies. She raised Scott, and she was one of the leaders of the Apocalypse New Genesis War on the side of Apocalypse, and by that time I meant the planet, okay, not not Darkseid. And in meeting her to talk peace, it's a very interesting moment. This happened back when Orion was still alive, I believe, too.
Yes, yeah, he asked them to assassinate her.
Yeah, and Barda is very nervous about meeting Granny because she never got anything good from Granny Goodness. That's kind of the point of her name. It's ironic.
Yep.
And but meanwhile, Scott, he was actually treated a little bit better than Barda. Not even better, but she just had moments with him where like he might have been set to be tortured for a week straight and she let him out on day 6 or day 5. Like stuff like that Scott really kept, and because that was the only quote unquote love he had to hold on to, the only kindness he had to hold on to, he just began to think that, all right, well, that's the norm and she loves me in her own way.
And how relatable is that, right? With a family member who is so toxic and damaging, but you still excuse it because you're like, oh, it's my aunt or my dad or my cousin or my sibling or whatever it is, they love me, like they just have a weird way of showing it. And, I think a lot of people can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, and it gets a little more twisted when Barda murders Granny Goodness and...
Yeah, because Scott can't, right? He can't bring himself to do it.
And Scott kind of like, that's a weird thing, like the woman you love just murdered the woman who raised you. Even though the woman who raised you was a monster, how do you respond to that? It's
heavy.
It is. It's a tough spot. And we see later that during negotiations, Granny has a mirror that shows who you really are. And they give that mirror to Scott. And we see this really powerful moment in which Scott undresses in front of the mirror, and you see that he's been scarred and burnt and he doesn't have any hair and like he's been flayed. You see that despite all the modern medicine miracles that have helped him look like an average person, that those scars are still there and they still run deep. And it's a literal interpretation of what trauma really is. And then Barda walks next to him, and you see that she looks the same way, and they both hold each other, and that was just an incredible moment.
Yeah, it was great.
They do end up doing some sort of negotiations to try and end the war, and here's where my theory comes in about why Darkseid didn't want to kill Scott right then and there.
Okay.
So we see that Darkseid, he says that I will end the war, I will give up my access to the anti-life equation, I will allow you to send in your own inspectors into Apocalypse to make sure everything's on the up and up. And all I ask in return is for your only child. Now, we've seen back and forth, they've been doing regular things with this child, putting them through tummy time, playing games with them, laying on the couch with them, like that's really where Scott wants to be. He doesn't want to be in New Genesis. We also find that this is kind of, Scott has now found a reason not to die. At one point, he gets run through with a sword. One of my favorite moments of the whole story. He gets run through with a sword, and he's bleeding out. He's walking. He just slumps over and falls. And then Motherbox starts talking to him. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically like his smartphone, but it's apocalyptic technology. And he starts hearing his wife tell him about how their baby said Dada for the first time. And it's just him laying down while you hear the kid saying Dada, and then Scott starts getting up and singing the song that he sings to his kid, the hush little baby, don't say a word. And he's saying it nice and slow as he finds a reason to get up and keep going. And I thought that
to stand up, right?
Yep, exactly. So I think that the reason why Darkseid kept Scott alive was for this moment. Not necessarily that he knew Scott was going to have a kid, but because narcissistic people, evil people, they don't want to do the bad thing, if this makes sense. They want control. It's not if a guy punches you in the face in an abusive relationship, I think it's less about the violent act of punching you in the face and more about the control, that you'll do what he asks next time so you don't get hurt. And in this case, Scott now has an opportunity to do something selfless, end the war, and make sure that millions of people will survive. But he knows that his son will suffer just as bad, if not worse, than how he suffered growing up.
Yeah.
And he actually considers it.
Yeah, Barda doesn't. He does.
Yeah, and that's how fucked up it is. Like, he is a broken person, and I don't think you can blame him for considering the option, because hell, he turned out okay, quote unquote. Like, maybe the same thing will happen with his
He
kid.
escaped, right? He got away, so maybe this kid could too.
Yeah, and I don't think we sold Barda enough.
Yeah, she was honestly my favorite character in the book. I thought she was incredible. So strong, so loving, just a perfect companion for Scott. I think he really needed her a lot throughout the book.
And the way that her vulnerability and strength were both captured by Gerads was really great. We do see, like, there are a couple of sex scenes between Scott and Barda that, they're safe for work, they're softcore stuff. But it is awesome to just continue to show multiple dimensions of a character, that they can be capable of throwing a tank with one hand, but also they do have these tender moments of vulnerability that maybe getting, hit with a laser won't faze them, but what does make them cry is when, their husband wanted to leave this world. Even
Absolutely.
though they were both facing it together.
Yep.
She really is a great way to round out Scott. And also she does a really good job of, like, not stepping in when it's his turn to negotiate and stuff. Like, she really could, I think.
Yes.
But she I think is really the one who's willing to leave this world behind. Like, when she gets home, she doesn't talk about it at all.
Yeah.
Like, she's able to leave it behind. And maybe we don't see her struggle. We just see Scott's. There definitely is something she's dealing with there. But we do see that they end up going through with this whole, we're going to give our baby to Darkseid, and that's it. And of course, they bring a veggie tray, which is what they brought from a previous issue. They had a veggie tray during Scott's trial.
Yeah, can we just talk about all the little, like, human moments that King puts in there? The veggie tray, seeing Darkseid eat carrots, seeing Orion eat some after he gets punched in the face. Big Barda forgets her mother box at one point when they're about to boom tube. She's like, shit, I forgot my mother box. Like, when you forget your phone in the house, right? Like, even that one sex scene where where Mr. Miracle's all tied up on the bed, and it's the whole page is just him, but they break it up into the different 9 panels, and he's like, I could escape at any time. And she's like, oh, can you? Because she knows he doesn't want to. It's like these little, like, I don't know. It just humanizes them so much that you for a minute you forget that this is a superhero comic and not just a family life and people dealing with their normal everyday stuff.
And it's beautiful to see that, because when you feel like you have some sort of an in with this hero, at least I felt afterwards. I'm like, you know what? I can do that too. I might not be able to do all the superhero stuff, but I can also take steps to live the life that I want to live and hopefully leave this trauma behind. And it is tough to do. I thought that it would be something I was just done with. And I'm not sure how much of it I've spoken about, but yes, raised by a narcissist who was addicted to crack, and also a mentally ill woman who, I think there was also some crack involved there. There's a lot of drugs, and then raised by a bunch of different people. Mom had a couple alcoholic boyfriends here and there. Father had at least a couple of alcoholic girlfriends. My martial arts instructor, she said that you will be dealing with this for the rest of your life. And whereas now that I look back on it, she didn't say a lot of stuff that really checks out. That was one of them. That, like, you will be dealing with this for the rest of your life. Like, no matter how far you come, no matter how much you accomplish, that is always part of your past.
Absolutely. Yeah, it always will be.
Now, we do see that Scott has a chance to repeat his past here. that he is getting his baby Jacob ready. Him and Barda, they go to Apocalypse. I did see a review online. Somebody hated the fact that this was how the story ended at the last issue. Like, he was like, oh, I don't know why middle-class white people have to make such a big deal out of having kids, because they had this moment where Barda comes and she sees another Fury there on Apocalypse who's supposed to inspect her for weapons, and they used to work together. So she's like, hey, girl, how you doing? How you been? How's the kid? All right, great, blah, blah, blah. I just have to check and see if you have any weapons. No? All right, you're good. Like, I think the reviewer kind of missed the whole point, that it's less about glorifying having a kid and more about, appreciating being able to do the normal things when you never envisioned yourself having a normal life to begin with. I think that's it. I still, wake up in a bed and I'm like, oh, this is fucking nice. 'Cause, some days I woke up in bed, some days I didn't. Like, it is important to appreciate those things. And, you see a lot of stuff online where they're like, talking to people with mental health issues. And it's like, if you've gotten out of bed today, you've done something other people didn't have the strength to do. Like,
yeah,
you take your small victories where you can get them, because that's what they are. And now we're on our way to Scott handing over the baby to Darkseid. And yes, Darkseid, he eats a carrot dipped in ranch sauce, which is hilarious. Really quick, I want to just go over how there was a moment during the negotiations between New Genesis and Apocalypse where Scott and Barda did kind of, they were on Apocalypse and they were staying there, and they kind of relived a little bit of their childhood. That they got into the rivers of lava and flames, and talked about the old times and stuff like that. It was definitely interesting, because when that's the only childhood you have to look back on, I guess you do kind of look back on it with some sort of positivity. You take what you can get.
Yeah, I during those negotiations too, I really like obviously Scott is leading those talks, and his like, I guess, stepbrother Calabac, I forgot how to say his name. He's
something like that.
He's getting really frustrated. He wants to like killing one of the prisoners, and he's yelling at Scott, and here it is. Mr. Miracle says, Calabac, brother, when will you finally learn? I'm not some New Genesis toddler. I'm not Orion eager to play your games. I am granny raised, and I don't waste time on the dead. Prisoner exchanges will be governed by the findings of the commission. That's it. That's the fucking end of it. And Calabac goes, whatever. And then the next page, you see how scared Scott actually is. He's shaking. And he's telling Barda, he's like, my teeth are clattering, like he had to be so tough and act like he wasn't bothered at all. But in reality, he was frightened, but he was putting on this strong face. But I just thought that was such a cool moment for him to kind of stand up to them and show them, he's not going to just bow to their will.
Well, yeah, that unlike Calabac, who has to scream all the time, Scott, he doesn't have to. Like, he doesn't have to be that guy. Because, he, like you said, he's granny raised. He knows who he is. And, I've probably mentioned it before, like me with like my martial arts experience, like I don't have to be the fucking tough guy all the time. Like, I'm not going to get upset over, I'm not going to start a fight over people throwing words around and everything like that. Like, no, like it's going to take a little more than that, because I know what I can do. And and Scott does have this awesome confidence, but also I think the next scene where the one thing that does make him different is that he didn't like that person was killed by Calabac.
No,
he was like, I don't worry about the dead. Yeah, he does. Like,
he does. Yeah. And I think Barda says he was dead either way. This is a better death for him. It was quick. He didn't get tortured. And, she's trying to ease his mind, because he's like, I don't want anyone to die. He wants to do the right thing and help everyone.
Yeah.
And in this scene, we also see a panel that says Darkseid is, which is a common reoccurring line, I think, in every issue of the book from the first issue on. And we constantly see that Darkseid is. And
I think it comes from a Grant Morrison run, too. Like, Like, he's very big into the whole Darkseid is with his when he writes Justice League and Darkseid. But
Yeah, Tom King. I was reading an interview by that he had, and he basically said that it was another writer. He didn't mention Grant Morrison. It was someone else, I believe, that had kind of brought up the idea to him, like, what is Darkseid to you? Because for a lot of people, Darkseid was the only character that really scared them in comics. Like, he was actually a frightening, entity. And so I think that Darkseid is like, what is he to you? What is Darkseid to you? What does he represent? What horror in your closet is Darkseid? And it's the one thing that I think that really truly scares all these characters throughout the book. Darkseid. He's unkillable. They think he's he's like the devil, right? And it's really frightening. And now, Scott has to come face to face with him again to finish his negotiations.
Yeah, to give his son up to this guy. And I also want to piggyback off the Darkseid is because, like you said, we did see it in a few previous issues, and it's kind of like that thing, like when you remember something bad that's happened to you, and it just comes up out of nowhere, and it's one panel, and then it's gone. You're like, all right, it happened, I want to put it away. But, like, it starts becoming more and more often after Orion gets killed. We see Darkseid is. Like, it's everywhere. And yes, so Scott is at this moment where he and Barda have to face it. And, he gives the kid to Darkseid. Darkseid rips his eye out so he can no longer control the Omega beams and use the anti-life equation. And we know that Darkseid is now depowered, and Scott decides, can I just say bye to my kid? And he lets this whole monologue about, I don't know what my father said to me, and I never remembered it, and you probably won't remember this, but just know that you have a father, you have a home, blah, blah, blah. And he holds this kid and hugs him, and that's when they enact their plan to have this fucking cosmic cannon on the bottom of the stroller, which if you want to look into it this way, as parenthood is their weapon in this case, because guess what? Like, you can't lose at this point. It's for your kid. And she's hitting Darkseid with this cannon, and he is still able to overcome it, punch her in the face. She's down. And then he starts going after Scott, throwing him around, hitting him. And the whole time Scott's holding his little baby boy, trying to keep him safe. He's not fighting back. And the baby is on the ground crying, and Scott's on the ground. Everyone seems unconscious at this point. And, I don't remember what Darkseid says. He's probably like, oh, you motherfuckers, you thought you could, take me. And and Barda has this beautiful moment where she's able to just get a few words out. And she goes, Scott, stand. And finally, you see that everything in his life has been building him toward this moment, for him to be able to just shake off the bullshit and stand no matter what's thrown at you. And that's what Scott's able to do. He just, all right, standing, gets up, gets a knife that Barda specially forged out of Orion's dead body, because that's also the DNA of Darkseid. So almost said Apocalypse. That's also the DNA of Darkseid, and he's able to grab that knife and stab Darkseid through the eye socket over and over again. He's finally able to defeat his demon while shouting, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, so every time he stabs it through the eye.
And they talked about that prophecy like over and over, right, of the son of Darkseid would kill him. And now you have the adopted son of Darkseid killing Darkseid with a knife made from Darkseid's actual son. So it's kind of awesome.
Yes.
And that wasn't the line he was supposed to say, right? Like I think him and Barda had practiced something else.
Yeah, escape this or something like that.
Yeah, she's like, I thought we practiced that. Now you cursed in front of Jacob, and he's like, you did too. And she's like, that's different. Like, it just, there was great character moments.
It was, and then we have the appearance of Metron in the Mobius chair, the best chair in the universe, as we know, and it's awesome because at this point they're like, oh, you said fuck in front of the kid, you said fuck, what? And then it goes to Jacob, the little baby, and he goes, fuck, F-U-U-U-G, when Metron appears. And we don't really get to see what happens with Metron. We just go into post everything, where Scott and Barda are back to their normal lives.
Well, he does say there's another world. He shows there's a splash page, one of the only in the book that's not in 9 panels, of all the heroes like in the DC universe, from Superman, Nightwing, Donna Troy, Orion, actually. Like, you see all of them. A
beautiful world where all of these heroes always win and save the day.
Yeah.
Now, did you interpret this as like this was Scott's moment to get to that world, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he's saying like now, this is what he says. He says, "You challenged the unchallenged, you dared the trap of death, and you escaped. And now it is time, my son, time to look in the face of God and hear your cheers and take your bow. Where you are is not where you should be, scot-free. There is another world." So I think he's trying to tell him come on, let's go back. Let's go to this world.
You think this is a Jacob's Ladder scenario?
Yeah, it is, definitely.
So which is why his son is named Jacob after Jacob's Ladder, which they specifically mentioned in the story. So this whole time it was Scott choosing to. So wait, but that would mean that this whole time Scott's been bleeding out and dying. Like as all 12 issues have been playing out, and at the very end he chooses not to live, not to go back to the world of the Justice League.
Exactly.
That's pretty fucked up. I didn't read it like that.
Oh yeah,
it's fucking me up now.
Absolutely, yep. And that's why, in the last issue, he keeps seeing all these different people that we've seen throughout the issues. He sees Bug. I think Bug tells him, "You're in hell," right? Like
Forager. He sees Forager.
Forager, thank you. So now you're just in hell, like forever. Dude, you should have gotten out. It's miserable here. It's all death and fire. Look what happened to me. I'm telling you, there isn't a speck of hope in it. And
then he sees Granny Goodness.
Yep.
Oberon. Yeah, he sees all these people that are telling him like, "Oh, this is hell," and then at one point, "Oh, this is heaven," like when he's with Barda and everything. Now, wow, I mean that's kind of fucking me up. I saw it more as he was actually given a chance to truly escape his life and go to a world where everything would be happy, but instead he decided to stay in a world where things are ugly because that's where he found his true happiness with Barda and Jacob.
I like that. I
think your version's correct, but I prefer mine.
Yeah, I think he wanted to escape his life, and he did. He finally did. And that's why, in the very last page, he's talking to Barda. Barda actually says Darkseid is, and he's like, "Yeah, I know, but we are too. Scot-free, Mr. Miracle, what is wrong with you?" He goes, "I can always escape." And she goes, "Can you?" And that's the end. And it says the Mr. Miracle series will not continue. Will not be continued. So, I get the idea is that, I guess, could he still escape death? Maybe. He always escapes. Maybe there is a chance in the future he will choose to, but he's not. He's not right now, and there will not be another issue because he is choosing to pursue this world, this death that he has chosen.
Jesus. And the thing that really fucked me up about it was like, especially when like, you're smoking and stuff, you do kind of had those moments where you're like, is that, what's real? What's not real? Is this world, is this the world I deserve? Have I done bad things? Like when bad things happen to you, you might think, oh, this is your own personal hell. But when also good things happen, like sometimes I do legitimately feel like I don't deserve good things. And I feel like, like I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's kind of where I felt Scott was at the last part of that. I mean, Tom King says in that interview, he also says that, it's not about a guy overcoming his trauma, but a guy who is traumatized finding happiness.
Absolutely.
Whether or not you go with the of he died or not or whatever, but in the end, that is Scott-free, the one we've been following for these 12 issues. That is his choice to find happiness in what some of us would consider a mundane life, but it's a life that he was never given the choice to live.
I do think there's a lot of feelings about suicide, and I think it was very hard for me to wrap my head around for many years, and I always thought it was a selfish choice, and I always was like, if you commit suicide, you're just hurting the people around you, but you don't know what that person's gone through, and who are we to say that maybe that's not what true happiness is for them? Maybe that's finally peace, and maybe that's for Scott, that's what it is. Suicide finally brings an end to his suffering, and he finds that happiness.
Well, yeah, because like it's kind of like no matter what, because of everything, he cannot be happy. And I don't think, a lot of people see it as the idea of like, oh, I hate myself or I hate my life, so I want it to end or whatever. Like I've also seen more that it's the idea of, you just don't want to continue to feel all of the bad stuff that you've been feeling. And, it's kind of the best way out at that point. I haven't done enough research on it. I'm literally just quoting memes and shit that I've seen online about mental health and everything. And, as I said, like, I've never felt that way at all. I've only ever had one moment. But when I did, it wasn't a violent thing at all. It was just, what if I wasn't here? That's it.
Yep.
That was, But overall, I would definitely recommend that you read this book. It was great. It was hyped up just the right way, I think. I am gonna have to come to terms with the fact that Scott did kill himself at the end. I'm gonna do some deep diving and see if that's indeed true. But
I did some last night too. And,
so then you would know for sure then.
I'm 99% sure that's
Send me some articles. Send me some articles. We'll throw them in the show notes. Listen, listeners, read it and make your own distinctions. It's a great story nonetheless. I do love the humanizing of superheroes. I really, really, really liked the art, which, there's some fun interviews that Mitch Gerads has where he talks about how, he switched from print, like pencil and ink to digital to, save time because, he even says like, at a certain point in your life, you realize that time is more important than money because like, comic book artists, they do make a lot of money from selling off their original art, but, for him, it's just quicker to do it digitally. Speaking of the art, in the panel he was on, he drew Scott free with this huge beard, which originally the man who had that beard was the original Mr. Miracle. And we see throughout the story from the beginning to end, Scott does grow this huge beard that's very similar, as if he's becoming the old Mr. Miracle. And on the very last issue, he shaves it, and he's Scott again. And it is this really great moment.
Yeah, definitely check it out, guys. It's a great read. It's just a really good comic book. It's Tom King at his best. Obviously, a very personal story, and the art's amazing. The characters are amazing. So I think it's one of those things where the journey is more important than the destination at the end. It doesn't really matter what that ending is. It's how Scott comes to terms with things because. That is what's happening. He's coming to terms with his life and possible death. And he can always escape.
And maybe that's the mindset it's supposed to give all of us, too. That, maybe not we should try and escape our problems, but no matter what we run into, stand, and you'll be able to find a way out of it. That being said, those are my final thoughts on Mr. Miracle by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. Have any final thoughts, Ty?
No, check it out. Read the book. It's great.
In the meantime, make sure to listen to us and rate and review on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the iHeartRadio app. You can find us on Twitter at PolitiPopPod. Find us on Instagram at PolitiPopPodcast. Email us to let us know your thoughts at PolitiPopcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to find our show notes and sources at PolitiPopPodcast.wordpress.com. We're not just making this stuff up. And speaking of stuff that deals with trauma and surviving, we'll be writing out today on a song that also brings tears to my eyes, much like this comic book did, Praying by Kesha. Special thanks to you, the listeners. Special thanks to all of our new followers. And special thanks to Antonia Little for logo design. For the Politipop Podcast, I've been Mike Booch.
I've been Ty.
And remember, no matter what you're watching, no matter what you're listening to, no matter what you're reading, always remember to never stop thinking, never stop learning, and read between the lines.
And scene.
Oh, you're so good at it.